My daughter-in-law slapped me hard across the face, leaving my cheek burning, and screamed, "Then go find somewhere else to live." When I refused to pay $850,000 for their luxury cruise, my son only nodded in silence. That night, I carried 2 suitcases and walked out of the house. Unexpectedly, I crossed paths with someone who could turn their dream vacation into a living nightmare. I'm glad you're here listening to this story. Stay until the end and tell me what city you're in. I want to know how far my story has traveled. I will not pay $850,000 for your cruise, Lillian, I said softly, but my words exploded like a bomb in the living room of my son Daniel's house. I saw my daughter-in-law's face twist, turning sharp and vicious. Her perfectly polished nails crumpled the cruise brochure in her grip. "Excuse me?" Lillian's voice went cold, the same tone she always used to make others feel small. I had heard it so many times in the 5 years since she married my son. I straightened my back, trying to summon whatever strength I had left. I made myself clear. "I'm not paying for your anniversary cruise." The room sank into heavy silence. Daniel sat frozen on the sofa between us, his eyes darting like he was watching a tennis match, but I knew whose side he would take. He always chose Lillian. "Ruth." Lillian rose slowly, her tall frame nearly 5'9", towering over me as I sat her day. "It seems you don't understand. This is not a request." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "I understand perfectly, and my answer is no." Then came the crack of her slap, as sharp as a gunshot. Heat spread across my cheek and down my neck. I raised a trembling hand to the burning skin. "Then go find somewhere else to live," Lillian shouted, finally dropping her fake calm. "I'm done carrying a selfish old woman who won't even help her own family." I turned to Daniel, praying he would defend me, tell his wife she had gone too far. But he only nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Mom," he whispered, "maybe it's time you find your own place. Lillian's right. We've been supporting you financially for too long." Those words of betrayal cut deeper than the slap. Daniel was my only son, the boy I raised alone after his father left when he was just 3 years old. I worked double shifts in diners, sacrificed everything so he could have the opportunities I never did. And this was how he repaid me. "I've been paying rent for the past 2 years. My voice shook as I fought to stay calm. "I've helped with groceries, covered bills, even paid the down payment on your car." Lillian laughed, high-pitched and cruel. "Helped? You mean that measly $1,360 a month? Daniel makes 6 figures. Your little contribution is nothing. Then why do you need $850,000 from me for a cruise?" I asked. Daniel finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I had never seen before: resentment. "Because we deserve it, Mom. Lillian and I work hard. We deserve a luxury vacation. With your money. The money you've just been hoarding." Lillian jumped in. "Why are you keeping it anyway? You're 62. No friends. No life. At least let the family enjoy it." Her words pierced me, because there was some truth. I had isolated myself, especially after moving in with them. Lillian slowly pushed me away from my few remaining friends, always finding reasons for me not to go to gatherings or for no one to visit. "I'm saving it for emergencies," I replied. "This is the emergency." Daniel stood, arms crossed. "Our marriage needs this trip, Mom. If you don't support us, maybe you need to reconsider what family means." I looked at my son, a man I barely recognized. When had he become so cold, seeing me as a burden instead of his mother? "I understand," I whispered, picking up my purse, my legs unsteady. "Good." Lillian sat back with a triumphant smile. "And don't think you can guilt us into changing our minds. Daniel agrees with me completely. I climbed the stairs to pack when I heard my son call after me. "Mom, wait." My heart flickered with hope. Maybe he would finally defend me. "I'll need all the money you have. That $850,000 plus the rest of your savings. Think of it as repayment for all the years you lived off us." Hope died instantly, replaced by a numb chill spreading through my body. I no longer trusted my voice, so I kept climbing to the small room on the 4th floor where I had lived for 2 years. I packed quickly. When you're treated as a guest in your own family, there isn't much left to take. 2 suitcases and a box of photo albums. That was my life. As I dragged my bags downstairs, I heard Lillian in the kitchen on the phone with her mother, her tone cheerful. "Yes," she finally agreed to leave. "I'm so relieved. Daniel and I will have our house back." I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening as she painted me as the villain. According to her, I had graciously stepped aside and even promised to fund their cruise as a farewell gift. At the door, Daniel was nowhere in sight, probably hiding in his office, too much of a coward to face what he had done. I set my suitcases down and looked around the house I once thought would finally be my place of belonging. The irony was sharp. The granite countertops and hardwood floors had been paid for with my help. When Daniel married Lillian, I gave them $340,000 from my life savings money. I scraped together over 30 years of mopping floors and carrying coffee pots. I pulled my luggage out into the cool evening breeze. My old 15-year-old Honda sat waiting like a loyal friend. At least it was mine, bought with my own labor. I loaded my bags, then sat behind the wheel, hands trembling. At 62, I was homeless, nearly alone in the world, with nothing but my car and a dwindling bank account. Hot tears rolled down my face as the truth sank in. My son had chosen his wife's greed over his mother's love. The child I sacrificed everything for now saw me as garbage. I started the engine and drove aimlessly through suburban streets, past houses echoing with family laughter, past restaurants where I once worked, past a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. As night fell, I parked in the lot of a 24-hour diner and stared at myself in the rearview mirror. My left cheek was still red from the slap, my eyes swollen from crying. I looked exactly like what I was, an older woman discarded, with nowhere left to go. But deep inside, beneath the pain and humiliation, something stirred. Like a spark anger, maybe, or the realization that I deserved better. I pulled out my phone and checked my balance. $1,479,000. Not a fortune, but far more than Lillian suspected. Money I scraped together penny by penny from jobs that bent my back and calloused my hands. I used to think I was saving for my family's future. But the truth was, I had built a prison for myself, made of guilt, duty, and the desperate need to be loved by people who only saw me as a wallet. The question now was, what would I do next? I lived in my car for 3 days, moving from lot to lot, thinking nonstop. Nights were the worst, curled up in the back seat, startled by every sound. Days I drove aimlessly, sometimes stopping at diners for coffee and a cheap meal, stretching my money as far as possible. On the morning of the 4th day, I stopped at the harbor. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the cry of seagulls or the sunlight dancing on the water, reminding me of younger years when I still believed the world was full of possibility. I walked along the wooden pier, breathing in the salty air. Massive cruise ships gleamed in the Sunday. I had never been on one, never could afford it, but I often dreamed of sailing away, leaving all my worries behind. And then I saw him, standing on the deck of a great ship in a crisp white captain's uniform, silver hair stirring in the morning breeze. Even after 40 years, I recognized him instantly, the strong jaw, the steady shoulders, the deliberate way he moved. David Morgan. My heart stopped, then thudded wildly. David Morgan, my first love, the man I once thought I would marry before life tore us apart. I hadn't seen him since 1983, when we were both 22 and thought we had all the time in the world. I froze on the pier, torn between running away before he noticed me or standing my ground. After 3 nights in my car, I must have looked a wreck, hair pulled back hastily, jeans and the sweater I wore when I left Daniel's house. But before I could decide, he looked up. Our eyes met across the water. He smiled the same smile that once made my young heart flutter and lifted his hand in greeting. Then he started down toward the gangway. Hearing someone call me by my maiden name blurred my eyes with tears. "I go by Ruth Miller now," I answered, though deep inside I wondered if that was even true anymore. Was I still a Miller when my own son had cast me aside? David jogged down the gangway. Time had treated him kindly. He was still tall and lean, though his hair was now snowy white, and crow's feet marked the years he had spent gazing over open seas. "My God," he said, stopping a few steps from me. "Ruth, after all these years, hello." Suddenly I felt like that 22-year-old girl again, shy and unsure. I remembered the summer we met at the Marine Supply Company. "You look—" He hesitated, eyes full of concern instead of judgment, "like you could use a cup of coffee and a real meal." I laughed shakily. "That obvious, huh?" He smiled. "I've been at sea 40 years, Ruth. I can read a human face the way I read storm clouds on the horizon." He gestured toward the ship. "Come aboard. We have some catching up to do." "I don't want to intrude. You must be busy, and I'm not exactly dressed for a cruise. I'm the captain. I invite who I please. And right now, I want to invite an old friend who looks like she could use someone to listen." The warmth in his voice nearly broke me. It had been so long since anyone spoke to me with such simple sincerity. I followed him up the gangway, awed by the size of the ship. "You really are the captain? You used to talk about this back then, but I never imagined." "Sea Star," David said proudly. 1,500 passengers, 600 crew. This has been my home for 10 years. He led me through marble-floored hallways, past crystal chandeliers and framed paintings. We passed grand dining rooms, lounges, even a theater and a shopping arcade. I couldn't help whispering, "It's incredible." "Wait until you see my quarters," he grinned. "Captain's privilege, the best view on board." Sure enough, his suite was larger than most apartments I had ever rented, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the harbor, a living room, dining area, and a bedroom beyond. "Coffee?" he asked, stepping into a small but well-equipped kitchen. "Yes, thank you," I said, settling onto a plush sofa, still overwhelmed by how my life had turned. 4 days ago, I was trapped in my son's house, dismissed and diminished. Now I was in the captain's quarters with my first love. David handed me a steaming cup and sat across from me, his blue eyes steady on mine. "What brought you here looking like you just walked through a storm?" I sipped the coffee, its warmth spreading through me. "That's a long story. I've got time. The ship doesn't leave until tomorrow afternoon." So I told him everything. My husband leaving when Daniel was a child, the endless jobs I worked to raise him, his marriage to Lillian, moving in with them and slowly losing myself. I told him about the slap, the betrayal, the 3 nights in my car. David listened quietly, his face growing more serious with every word. When I finished, he set down his cup and leaned closer. "Let me get this straight. His voice was calm but firm. Your son and daughter-in-law demanded $850,000, and when you refused, they threw you out of your own home? Hearing it spoken so plainly filled me with shame. When you say it like that, it sounds even worse. It is exactly that bad, he said, his jaw tight. Ruth, that's elder abuse. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. No, I mean, they exploited you financially and discarded you when you wouldn't hand over more. That is abuse. He stood and began pacing. How much have you given them over the years? I calculated in my head. $340,000 for their wedding, $255,000 for the house. Rent, bills, groceries, altogether about $1,020,000 in 2 years. David shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. My God, Ruth. I choked up. I just wanted to help. Daniel is my son. He turned back, eyes steady. A son should honor his mother, not drain her dry. So what are you going to do now? He asked. I shook my head. Maybe find a cheap apartment, pick up some kind of job, though at my age. I let my shoulders drop, defeated. David stared out the window in silence, then turned back with a look I couldn't quite read. What if I told you there's another way? He leaned forward, his eyes serious. Ruth, I'm not just a captain. I'm a co-owner of Morgan Lines. Have you ever heard of it? I shook my head. We started 20 years ago with just a few small ships. Now we have 12 sailing all over the world, and we need someone to oversee guest services. What do I know about ships? I blurted out. He chuckled. You know how to take care of people. You know how to handle the difficult ones, balance a budget, solve problems on the fly. You've been doing it all your life. And you know what sacrifice means. Those are exactly the qualities we need. I stared at him. Are you offering me a job? Not just a job. A partnership, he said seriously. I want you to join in managing the company. The offer was so unexpected, so generous, that it left me dizzy. David, I can't. I don't know the first thing about running a business. You know more than you think, and you'd have the best teacher. He smiled. Inside me rose a feeling I hadn't known in years. Hope. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this for me? David grew thoughtful. Do you remember the last time we saw each other? The night before you left for New York to take your scholarship, and I shipped out as a junior officer on a freighter. We both knew life would split our paths, but I was too young to ask you to stay. That night, I should have asked you to marry me. It's the greatest regret of my life. I couldn't breathe, he added quickly. I don't say this to pressure you or to ask for anything romantic. I just want you to know I never stopped caring. If I can give you the chance to start fresh, to build something after everything you've endured, then maybe I can make up for a little of the past. I set down my coffee cup, my hands trembling. Outside, the harbor bustled with life. For years I had lived only for others, while my own dreams faded away. I don't know anything about business partnerships, I murmured. David smiled. That's perfect, because you'll have a great teacher. So, Ruth, are you ready to leave it all behind and begin a new journey? I looked around the luxurious room, thought of the old car in the parking lot with all my belongings crammed into 2 suitcases, thought of Daniel and Lillian, probably out spending money like it would never run out. Maybe it was time to stop being the victim. Yes, I answered, surprised at the certainty in my own voice. I think I'm ready. The next 6 weeks flew by like a whirlwind. David hadn't exaggerated when he promised me the best teacher. Every morning I went to Morgan Lines headquarters, a gleaming building by the port, to learn about the cruise industry. At first, I was overwhelmed. Guest service protocols, safety regulations, staff management, vendor contracts, dining operations. But little by little, it all began to click. 30 years of customer service as a waitress translated almost seamlessly into guest service management. Years of stretching a household budget became strategies for optimizing costs across an entire fleet. "Unnatural for this work," David said when we reviewed a passenger satisfaction report. I smiled warmly. "I just apply common sense. People want to feel respected. They want problems fixed quickly, and they want joy to be multiplied. It's not rocket science." "You'd be surprised," David said with a grin. "Not everyone in this industry gets that simple truth." Too many were obsessed with profits and efficiency metrics, forgetting that our job was to create memories. I was now living in a company apartment near the office, a lovely one-bedroom overlooking the sea. David said it was just temporary, until I decided where I wanted to settle long-term. The sense of freedom was still hard to believe. 3 weeks after starting training, I officially took charge of guest services. The $850,000 I once refused to hand over to Lillian had become an investment in me. It was money bringing returns for my future, not funding someone else's extravagance. "Are you sure about this?" I asked David as we sat in a lawyer's office. "This is a huge risk for you." He smiled. "The biggest risk of my life was letting you go 40 years ago. I won't make that mistake twice." The tension between us was undeniable, but we took it slow. Almost every evening we shared dinner, sometimes at fine restaurants, sometimes with takeout boxes in his apartment. We talked for hours about the past, about work, about everything except the growing bond between us. I realized I was changing. It showed in the way I walked, in the confidence creeping into my voice during meetings. For the first time in decades, I wasn't apologizing for taking up space or grateful for scraps of attention. I was adding real value, and people respected me for it. The change wasn't just inside. David urged me to refresh my wardrobe for my new role, and shopping for business attire felt like an awakening. After years of buying only what was cheap and durable, I had forgotten the feeling of choosing clothes that made me shine. Now I had tailored blazers, elegant dresses, and shoes that made me feel powerful instead of merely practical. Looking in the mirror, I saw a businesswoman, not a discarded mother surviving on pity. Since leaving Daniel's house, my phone had stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no one checking in. That silence said everything. They wanted me gone from sight and mind, but I knew it wouldn't last. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing the fleet's Caribbean schedule. Daniel's name lit up my phone. I paused before answering. "Hello, son." "Mom." His voice was tense. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I'm exactly where you told me to be, Daniel, living my own life." "Mom, about that day, Lillian feels bad. I do too. Why don't you come home and talk this out like adults?" I let out a soft laugh. "Come home? You made it clear I had no place in your house. You're exaggerating. That day we were just stressed about money and you decided to dump it all on me?" I cut in, my voice sharp. "What do you need, Daniel?" There was a pause. "We're in financial trouble. Lillian invested money in a friend's company, thought it was a sure thing, but it went bankrupt last month. Now we can't cover the mortgage, and the travel agency wants payment." I closed my eyes. "How much?" "About $680,000, he said, voice dropping. I understood. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He was calling because he needed money. "So you think I'm going to hand over another $680,000? Mom, please, we're family. I know we messed up, but we're desperate. The bank is threatening foreclosure. If we don't pay for the cruise, Lillian will leave me. She says she can't live with a failure. Once, that would have crushed me with guilt, sent me scrambling to save them. Not anymore. Daniel, listen closely, I said. I'm not giving you a dime. Not for the house, not for the cruise, not for anything. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You and Lillian blew through money recklessly without asking anyone. You made the choices, and now you want me to shoulder the consequences. That's not happening. I heard his breathing quicken on the other end. You made that clear when you threw me out. Don't rewrite the story, Daniel. That day you demanded $850,000 and struck me when I refused. Silence fell. Then his voice shifted, colder. Fine. But when you're old and frail, don't expect me to take care of you. You'll be alone. That threat might have terrified me once. Now I only smiled. I already am alone, Daniel, and I'm doing just fine. I hung up before he could say more. That evening, David and I had dinner at a little Italian restaurant near the harbor. I told him about the call, and he listened carefully. How do you feel? He asked, pouring more wine. Relieved, I admitted. For years I'd hoped my son would value me. That if I sacrificed enough, he'd see me as more than a wallet. Now I knew that would never happen. To him, I was just a backup plan. And I was done being anyone's safety net. David took my hand. I'm proud of you. Just those words warmed me more than I could say. How long had it been since anyone told me that? Since anyone saw my strength instead of just my usefulness? There's one more thing, David said, tracing circles on my hand. Today I got a call from reservations. Someone booked a cruise on the Sea Star for next month's Caribbean trip. Daniel and Lillian. My heart tightened. They had booked the cruise, no doubt, on credit cards. The same trip they once demanded $850,000 from me to fund. David looked at me. They'll be on our ship. What do you want to do? I was silent a long time. I pictured them strolling the deck, posing for photos by the pool, complaining if the towels weren't soft enough. With no idea that the woman they discarded now co-owned the company providing their dream vacation. I want to be there, I said at last, not to cause a scene, just to see it, to stand in the place where they once thought I didn't belong, and to know exactly who I am now. David nodded. The Sea Star is launching its new guest service program next month. It'll be the perfect time for the new vice president to appear. I raised an eyebrow. He smiled. Effective immediately if you want it. I glanced around the restaurant, the harbor lights shimmering through the window. 6 weeks ago I was sleeping in my car, abandoned and alone. Now I was co-owner, vice president, a woman with choices, with power, with a future. I want it, I said. David lifted his glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking mine against his. But in my heart I was already picturing the moment Daniel and Lillian stepped onto the ship, still believing I was the weak woman they could control. They had no idea what awaited them. For the first time in my life, I would not be a victim in anyone else's story. I would be the author of my own. On the morning of departure, I stood on the bridge of the Sea Star, watching passengers board. The orderly bustle was familiar now after weeks of training. 1,500 souls, all brimming with excitement. I had lived on board for 2 weeks, learning every detail of its operations. My suite was on the same deck as David's, connected by a private corridor we both quietly cherished. Our relationship had grown naturally, like resuming a conversation paused 40 years ago. There, David murmured, pointing toward a couple stepping onto gangway B. Your son and his wife. My stomach tightened at the sight of Daniel and Lillian. Even from a distance, I recognized Lillian's designer luggage, Her carefully styled hair, the commanding way she ordered the porters around. Daniel trailed behind, looking older than 37, his shoulders slumped, the posture of a man forever trying to please someone who could never be pleased. "Just as I imagined," David muttered. I had shown him a few family photos still on my phone, and he'd studied them with the eyes of a strategist, which, truthfully, wasn't wrong. "We've planned for this day, remember?" David reminded me. "Now you're Ruth Morgan, Vice President of Guest Services. You're simply supervising the boarding process." A week earlier, I had begun using that name. David's idea, for business, he said. But we both knew it meant more. The name was like armor, shielding the new woman I had become from the scars of the old Ruth. I walked down to the main deck in a crisp navy blazer embroidered with the Morgan Lines logo, my nameplate gleaming. I stationed myself near the guest services counter, pretending to review registration, while waiting for the moment I had both dreaded and longed for these past weeks. An hour passed before they appeared. Lillian first, of course, just as I expected. She swept into the grand atrium as though it belonged to her. She wore a white summer dress that likely cost more than I once made in a month, and a diamond bracelet that sparkled under the chandeliers. Daniel followed, eyes wide with awe at the sheer scale of the ship. Despite everything, my heart ached with a flicker of maternal love. As a little boy, he'd had that same look every time I took him to the zoo or the county fair places his father never bothered to take him. They walked up to the counter, and Lillian was already armed with a complaint. "Excuse me," she said to Sophia, our head of guest services, "but there's been a mistake with our cabin. I booked a balcony suite, not some tiny inside room like this." Sophia calmly checked the computer. "It shows here you're in cabin 4127, an interior room. Does that match your booking confirmation?" "That's impossible," Lillian snapped. "I specifically asked for a balcony suite. I understand your frustration. Let me see what upgrades are available." Sophia's fingers flew over the keyboard. "There are a few balcony suites open, but it would be an additional $13,600 per night for a 7-night cruise. That totals $95,200. We can't afford that," Daniel cut in, his voice tight. Lillian turned on him with a glare. "Don't embarrass me, Daniel. We'll take the upgrade." "Lillian, our credit cards are maxed out just to pay for this trip." "We can't." "Then find a way," she hissed, thinking only he could hear, but I was close enough to catch every word. "I'm not spending our anniversary in a windowless closet." That was my chance. I stepped forward, my professional smile firmly in place. "Excuse me, is there a problem I can help with?" Sophia looked relieved. "Mrs. Morgan, they're requesting a cabin. Upgrade." Lillian turned toward me. For a split second, I thought she might recognize me, but her eyes passed over me as if I were nothing more than staff. Finally, someone who knows how to help. This young woman seems to think we can't afford a simple upgrade. I looked straight at the face that once slapped me, threw me out of my home, and tried to drain my life savings. She looked at me expectantly, like she always had, waiting for me to fix everything. "I'm Ruth Morgan, Vice President of Guest Services," I said, extending my hand. "And you are?" "Lillian Lopez," she answered, shaking my hand with the limpness of someone who thinks the gesture beneath her. "This is my husband, Daniel. We're celebrating our anniversary and we need a balcony suite." "Of course. Let me see what I can do." I moved behind the counter, pretending to review their booking. Daniel lingered behind her, and when our eyes met, I caught a flicker recognition. Maybe, but it vanished so quickly I wasn't sure. "Yes, I see the issue, I said after a moment. This reservation was made fairly close to the sailing date. So many premium suites were already booked. That's not true. Lillian's voice rose. I booked months ago. I tilted my head, scanning the screen. According to our records, this reservation was made 6 weeks ago, and the payment card was declined twice before it went through. Daniel's face flushed red. That was just a bank error. Of course, I replied smoothly. These things happen. I could feel the balance of power shifting, and it was intoxicating. For the first time, I held all the cards. They needed me. I had the choice. I do have one option, I said. A balcony suite just opened up from a last-minute cancellation. The upgrade will be complimentary, as a gift for your anniversary from Morgan Lines. Lillian's eyes lit up. Really? That's wonderful. There's just one condition, I continued. This suite includes private concierge service, which means you'll be working directly with me throughout the cruise to ensure everything meets our highest standards. That sounds perfect, Lillian said quickly. We value good service, I smiled. Excellent. Sophia will issue your new keys. The suite is on deck 12. I think you'll find it more than suitable for your celebration. While Sophia processed the paperwork, Lillian leaned closer, whispering conspiratorially. Just between us, it's such a relief dealing with competent management, not these low-level employees who don't understand customer service. I understand completely, I replied. Good service is about giving people exactly what they deserve. 20 minutes later, I watched them head toward the elevators. Lillian floated with satisfaction at getting her way. Daniel glanced back several times. I caught something in his expression, but he said nothing, only followed his wife as he always had. I returned to the bridge, where David waited with a knowing smile. How did it go? He asked. They didn't recognize me, I answered. Though inside I felt a tangled mix of relief, satisfaction, and a deep sadness that my own son hadn't known his mother. It's all right. I think it is. Seeing them like this, they're exactly who I always knew they were, but it feels different now that I don't depend on them anymore. David nodded. Power changes perspective. They're in the Sunrise Suite, I told him. The one with cameras. It was part of our new service training program, fully legal and outlined in the fine print of the cruise contract, though few passengers ever bothered to read it. And they have a private concierge, David reminded me. Me, I said firmly. Exactly. You. I looked out toward the port as the last passengers boarded. They're going to get exactly the level of service they themselves deserve. The ship's horn sounded, signaling departure. I watched the crew prepare to release the moorings. Soon we would be at sea, a floating city of 1,500 passengers and 600 crew, all under David's command. And somewhere beneath us, in their newly upgraded suite, Daniel and Lillian were probably already ordering room service, blissfully unaware that the woman they had cast aside now oversaw every detail of their vacation. The old Ruth would have felt guilty for orchestrating such a ruse, would have tried to reconcile, would have bent over backwards to please them. But I was no longer the old Ruth. I was Ruth Morgan, Vice President of Guest Services, co-owner of this ship and this company, partner to a man who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. Tomorrow night would be the welcome gala, where David traditionally introduced the key staff to the passengers. That would be my moment for everyone to see who would be taking care of them during the voyage. I was looking forward to it. What are you thinking? David asked, standing beside me, gazing out the bridge windows. I'm thinking about tomorrow night, I replied. About the moment they realize who I really am. And how does that make you feel? David asked. I thought carefully before answering. Free. For the first time in my life, completely free. The Sea Star slipped away from the dock, carrying us toward open water. But this time, I didn't fear the unknown. I had learned that sometimes the unknown is exactly where you're meant to be. Behind us, the port shrank into nothing more than a memory on the horizon. Ahead lay 7 days at sea, 7 days in which Daniel and Lillian would slowly discover that their actions carried consequences they had never imagined. I wasn't plotting revenge. I only wanted them to live in the same reality I had endured for years. A world where respect is earned, not demanded, where a person's worth is measured by character, not connections. The first 3 days unfolded like a carefully staged performance. As their private concierge, I shadowed their every move, maintaining perfect professional distance. They treated me exactly as I expected, like staff hired to cater to their every whim. "Ruth!" Lillian snapped her fingers to get my attention. "The towels in our bathroom aren't soft enough. Fix it." "Yes, Mrs. Lopez," I said with a polite nod. "I'll have housekeeping take care of it right away." Daniel barely acknowledged my presence, which shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. He was the son I had raised alone, the child I had worked 3 jobs to support, and now he looked through me as if I were invisible. Through the discreet monitoring system, David and I watched their private moments. The fights were constant and vicious. Lillian belittled Daniel for everything: his clothes, his way of speaking, his failure to provide the lifestyle she believed she deserved. "I can't believe I married a loser." Lillian spat on their anniversary night, her voice sharp with contempt. "Your mother was right about one thing: you're a disappointment." Daniel shrank at her words. "Lillian, please. We're supposed to be celebrating our anniversary." "Celebrating what? 5 years of mediocrity. 5 years of pretending you're something you're not. At least when your mother was paying, we had a shred of dignity," Daniel muttered every week. "She'll come around. She always does." But Lillian shook her head. "Not this time. She's turned selfish. Typical. Well, at least this cruise is paid for. After this, things have to change." From the security office, David and I watched. He gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Do you still think you made the wrong choice?" I shook my head. The woman I saw on that screen was not someone I had ever truly known. I had glimpsed her cruelty before, but I always made excuses, blamed stress, blamed circumstances. Now her true nature was laid bare, and it was uglier than I had imagined. On the 3rd day, the incident happened that changed everything. I was overseeing dinner service when raised voices carried across the dining room. Lillian was standing at her table, berating a young waitress named Carmen, just 23, on her first cruise contract, sending money home to her family. "This is completely unacceptable." Lillian's voice rang out, drawing stares. "I asked for my dressing on the side, and you brought the salad tossed." Carmen bowed her head in apology. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I can bring you another right away." "No, that's not good enough. I want to speak to your manager. This is exactly why people like you shouldn't work in hospitality." The words hit me like a punch. I had heard that tone before, aimed at me countless times. But now she was hurling it at Carmen, a hard-working young woman just trying to support her family. Rage flared inside me. Daniel sat silent, avoiding everyone's eyes, even his wife's. He was ashamed, but too weak to stop her. I approached the table, my professional smile masking the fire in my chest. "Is there a problem here?" Lillian turned, her face relaxing with relief. "Ruth, thank God. This waitress ruined my order and then had the nerve to argue with me." I looked at Carmen, her eyes brimming with tears, then back at Lillian. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. These things happen. No, not when staff are properly trained. I want her fired. The dining room fell silent. Some passengers frowned in disapproval, others watched with that uneasy fascination reserved for public humiliation. Mrs. Lopez, I said evenly, I understand you're upset, but let's step outside and discuss this privately. This isn't the place. This girl doesn't deserve to work here, Lillian snapped. I glanced at Carmen, knowing her story, her siblings, her parents, all depending on her income. Carmen is one of our best employees. She's been recognized multiple times for excellence in guest service, I said, letting a touch of steel enter my voice. Lillian's eyes narrowed. You're contradicting me. I'm simply providing accurate information about our staff. Perhaps the mix-up came from the order itself. There was no mix-up. She's incompetent, and you're clearly too inexperienced to recognize poor service. The insult hung heavy in the air. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I looked Lillian straight in the eye. I have more experience in guest service than you can imagine. Much more. Something in my tone must have cut through her haughty fury, because she hesitated, studying me more closely. Don't I know you from somewhere? She asked slowly. Daniel looked up. His eyes met mine, and in that instant, recognition broke across his face like sunrise. His skin went pale. Mom, he whispered. The dining room fell into stunned silence. Lillian's mouth dropped open as she looked from her husband to me, speechless. Hello, Daniel, I said evenly. Hello, Lillian. Lillian's expression flickered through shock, confusion, anger, then shame, as she realized every person there had heard Daniel call me Mom. She stammered. You were supposed to be homeless, desperate, begging you to take me back? I was, for 4 days, but then I found something better. Daniel stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Mom, what are you doing here? Why are you on this ship? I work here, I answered. In fact, I co-own it. It was as if both of them had been slapped. Lillian stumbled back, clutching the chair. That's impossible. It's possible, I said. Then I turned to the passengers watching. Forgive the interruption. Families can be complicated. Regarding Mrs. Lopez's complaint, I'll make a note that she requested an employee be fired for delivering exactly what she ordered. I looked at Carmen. Thank you for your patience. Carmen nodded gratefully. I turned back to Daniel and Lillian. I hope you continue to enjoy your vacation. We'll have time to talk later. I started to walk away, but Lillian's panicked voice rang out. Wait! We need to talk. I don't think so, I replied politely. There's no misunderstanding. You made your feelings about me perfectly clear. I gestured around the elegant dining room. As you can see, I've moved on, Daniel stammered. Mom, please, can we meet privately? Looking at his pale, desperate face, I felt the faint stirrings of an old instinct to embrace him, to fix it all. But the urge was weak now, replaced by clarity. Tomorrow, at the welcome gala, I'll be on stage with the executive team. The meaning hit them both at once. Lillian blanched as she realized I would be introduced not just as senior staff but as an owner. Oh God, Daniel muttered. What have we done? I looked at him for a long moment, the man who had thrown his own mother out, choosing his wife's cruelty over my love. You got what you wanted, I said softly. A life without a mother. I walked away, leaving them in the glittering dining room, surrounded by whispers about the humiliation they had just endured. I felt lighter than ever before. The truth was out. The curtain had fallen, Tomorrow, when David introduced me before the entire passenger list as his business partner, and the woman he loved, Daniel and Lillian, would finally understand what they had lost. But more importantly, I knew I had broken the last chain tying me to a family that had never valued me. The old Ruth might have felt guilty for shaming them, but the new Ruth Morgan felt only the sweetness of justice. That night, I would dine with David in the captain's quarters, planning our future, and tomorrow I would stand on that stage as his equal partner in a maritime empire, cherished and respected by the man who saw my true worth. The theater was packed. At the welcome gala, 1,500 passengers filled the red velvet seats, dressed in evening wear, buzzing with anticipation. From backstage, I could hear the hum of voices, the clinking of glasses, that electric tension before every grand event. I stood by the side door in a navy cocktail dress David had helped me choose, elegant, confident, radiant. The woman in the mirror bore no resemblance to the broken mother who had once slept in her car just 2 months before. Now, I belonged on that stage. I had earned my place in the world. "Ready?" David asked, adjusting his naval uniform. He would open the evening and introduce the leadership team, including me. "I've never been more ready," I answered honestly. Through the curtain, I saw Daniel and Lillian sitting in the third row. They had tried to look polished for the occasion, probably with clothes bought in haste for a trip they couldn't afford. Daniel fidgeted with his phone, while Lillian sat rigid, her face tight, straining to hide her unease. Since the incident in the dining room the day before, they had tried to reach me 3 times, calling my cabin, leaving notes at the front desk, even blocking my path near the pool. I had avoided them all. Let them wait. Let them taste the unease I had lived with for years. The lights dimmed. David strode onto the stage to warm applause. Commanding in his uniform, he welcomed the passengers with confidence and charm. He introduced the head chef, the cruise director, the hotel manager. Each received warm applause. I stood backstage, my heartbeat steady. This was my moment. "And now," David's voice rang out, warm and deep, "I want to introduce someone very special to the Morgan Lines family. Please welcome our Vice President of Guest Services and my business partner, Ruth Morgan." Applause thundered as I stepped forward. But my eyes locked on Lillian's face, watching her shock play out in full. Her mouth fell open, but no words came. Daniel's face drained of all color. Around them, the passengers kept clapping, oblivious to the family drama unfolding in row 3. "Ruth joined our company 2 months ago," David continued, taking my hand and drawing me close. "She brings decades of experience in service and a passion for making every guest feel valued and at home." He paused, then smiled. "And she is also the woman I am going to marry." The theater erupted in delighted whispers and applause. Passengers always adored a love story, especially one where the captain loved his own partner in business. I smiled as David kissed me softly, a tender public declaration. Cheers echoed through the hall. "I'm so excited for the future," I said into the microphone, my voice strong. "Morgan Lines has become my home, and I am committed to making every guest feel the same sense of belonging and appreciation that I've found here." I looked directly at Daniel, the son who had thrown me out, and let the sting of my words settle. After the gala, guests gathered in the grand atrium. Daniel and Lillian made their way toward the stage. I saw how they moved, Daniel hesitant, weak, while Lillian strode ahead with false confidence, still clinging to the illusion of control. "Mom," Daniel said quietly as he drew close, just loud enough for me to hear. "We need to talk." "Of course," I replied politely. "But tonight I'm busy. I have work with Sophia, as you know. Lillian stepped forward, her voice syrupy. Ruth, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. When we said those things, it was only from stress. What things? I asked flatly. When you demanded $850,000? When you slapped me? When you threw me out of my home? Or when you tried to fire my staff yesterday for doing their job correctly? Each word struck them like a blow, their faces paling as if I had punched their chests. Guests nearby began to sense tension in the air. Daniel stammered, "Please, Mom, talk to me privately. You're still my mother." "Am I?" I asked softly. "Because when you cast me out, you made it clear I was no longer part of your family." Daniel's eyes welled with tears. "I was wrong. We made a mistake. But you can't abandon us forever. We're family." I looked at my son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, but the desperate hunger for his affection was gone. In its place, I found peace and self-respect. "Daniel," I said gently, "for 37 years, I gave you everything. My time, my money, my energy, even my dreams. When you married Lillian, I welcomed her as a daughter. I helped you buy a house, supported your career changes, babysat your child so you two could be together." Daniel nodded, tears streaming. "I know, Mom. I know you did everything. And when I asked for one thing from you, not money, not gifts, just respect, you chose your wife's cruelty over my dignity." I looked at Lillian. "You let her strike me. You cast me out. You even threatened to take the little I had left." "I'm sorry," Daniel whispered. "I don't know what I was thinking." "You were thinking of the easy way out," I said calmly, "avoiding conflict with your wife and forgetting your mother." Lillian jumped in. "Listen, we all say things we don't mean, but we're family. Families forgive." I turned to her, my voice like ice. "You never saw me as family. You only accepted me when I was funding you, and when I stopped, you discarded me. That is not family." "But the money," Lillian pressed, her voice rising. "You have so much, and we're about to lose everything, our house, our debts. You can't just leave us with nothing." "I can," I said, nodding. "And I will. Financial mistakes have consequences, and you will face yours." They stared at me, stunned. They had expected me to be their safety net again. "You'd really let us lose our home?" Daniel's voice cracked. "I'm not letting you lose anything," I replied. "This is the result of your own choices, of Lillian's reckless investments, of living beyond your means, of believing I'd always come to your rescue. That is not my responsibility." David stepped closer, slipping his arm around my waist. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes flicking over Daniel's and Lillian's desperate faces. "Everything's fine," I answered. "Just having a word with my son and daughter-in-law. They're about to leave." "We're not leaving," Lillian started, but I cut her off. "Yes, you are. This conversation is over." Daniel looked at me once more, his eyes pleading. "Mom, I'll do anything. I'll leave Lillian if that's what you want." He dropped to his knees, his voice breaking. "I'll beg, I'll plead. Just don't abandon me." His promise to leave Lillian was nothing more than hollow desperation. He would never do it, and we all knew it. But even if he did, it was far too late. What we had was shattered beyond repair. "Daniel," I said softly, a flicker of sorrow rising in me, "I'm not abandoning you. You abandoned me 2 months ago when you threw me out of your house. Now I'm only accepting the reality you created." "But you're rich now. You have everything," he muttered. "Yes, I do," I replied. "I have a job I love, a man who cherishes and respects me, a future full of hope. And most importantly, I have people beside me who value me for who I am, not for what I can give. I glanced around the grand atrium, the passengers enjoying the evening, the staff who had become colleagues and friends, and David, the man who helped me rediscover my worth. This is my family now. The words hit Daniel like a blow. He staggered back, finally feeling the full weight of rejection. "You can't be serious," he whispered. "I can, and I am," I said, taking David's hand, feeling the strength and warmth in his grasp. "I'm done being your safety net. I'm done sacrificing my happiness for your convenience. I won't pretend anymore that blood is more important than basic decency." Lillian made one last frantic attempt. "What about the children? Don't you want to be a grandmother?" Her question struck at the tenderest place, reminding me of what I might lose in the future. Yet, instead of pain, I felt a strange relief. "Any children you have will be raised by you two, with your values and your priorities. I believe they'll be better off without my influence." With that, I turned and walked away, David at my side. Behind me, Lillian's panicked cries and Daniel's desperate pleas grew fainter, but I never looked back. We stepped onto the deck, where the warm Caribbean night breeze wrapped around us. The ship surged forward into the dark waters, leaving a sparkling wake behind. "How do you feel?" David asked, holding me close. I thought for a moment, then answered, "Free. For the first time in my life, truly free." "Any regrets?" he asked. I thought of Daniel and Lillian, now sitting in their cabin, finally realizing their actions had brought permanent consequences. I thought of the grandchildren I might never meet, the family gatherings where I would always be absent, the ties of tradition I had cut forever. "No," I said truthfully. David kissed me under the star-filled sky. Gentle, sweet. When we pulled apart, he smiled. "So what do you want to do with this freedom?" I gazed out over the endless sea, where islands waited to be discovered, adventures to be lived, and a business to build together. "Everything," I said. "I want to do everything." The next morning, Daniel and Lillian left the ship at the very first port. They didn't stay the full voyage, didn't enjoy the vacation they had, borrowed to afford. They flew home to face crushing debt, and a marriage collapsing this time without the safety net they once took for granted. As I stood on the deck, watching the world slip by, I realized something. Sometimes family isn't about blood, but about those who truly see and lift you up. Love, too, isn't about duty or obligation, but about respect and genuine partnership. I had lost part of my family in the traditional sense, but I had gained a new one, people who valued me for who I really was. Life forces us to choose sometimes, to stay silent and keep suffering, or to rise and reclaim our voice and dignity. I chose to rise, and I discovered that real freedom doesn't come from money or status, but from knowing exactly what you deserve. And what about you? If it were you, would you choose silence for the sake of fragile peace, or would you find the courage to stand up and change? I'd love to hear your answer in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring more stories with me, stories where every experience holds a lesson, stay close, because the next story might just be the one that shines a light on your own journey.